Welcome to another Mind Espresso, 3 to 5 minute mind hacks from some of the top thought leaders in the world. And today I'm going to talk about Dr. Susan David, the author of Emotional Agility, and Sean Webb, who wrote Mindhacking Happiness. And I'm going to start with Susan, who has a really important message, which is our emotions are not controlling us, right? We can take charge of our emotions, hence emotional agility. She said the problem is people don't look at their emotions the right way. We interpret the emotions as us rather than as signals that are telling us something, right? And that's a big difference. And she says after you interpret your signal, then you can make a choice, right? What is the emotion that I want to live out throughout the day? What's most useful to me? Now, a really helpful tool to go along with Dr. Susan David's work is the equation of emotion. And Sean Webb in Mindhacking Happiness talks about this simple equation that can help us self-regulate. He says he's never had a bad day since he started doing this, and I kind of believe him. So the simple equation of emotion is your perception of reality against the expectation that you had. And the mind is always measuring, are we falling behind, are we going forward? Are we falling behind, are we going forward? So if you have really high expectations and your perception is meh, you're not going to walk away from that instance feeling very good. And that's true about your work life. If your expectation was, I should be a CEO, and you're still climbing the ladder, you're not going to feel very good. If your expectation for a relationship was here and the reality is perceived to be here, it's not going to feel very good. But here's the key. Both expectation and perceived reality are under your control. And a real question to ask yourself is that a useful expectation, right? Or is this a should from some other point in my life? I should have been X, I should have been Y, or this should go this way, or Facebook makes me think X, or Instagram makes me think Y, right? Our expectation is being shaped by all these outside forces, and we have to take control of that and say, what is a useful expectation for me? Now that is one side of it, right? Because the lower your expectation, then just you don't have to have as much perceived reality to be able to balance that out. And Sean points out that the happiest people in the world are in Norway and they have low expectations. Not saying you should always live your life that way, but you should intentionally think about your expectation. But there's also a lot of power in perception. I could go out to dinner and I could meet this guy and think, God, what an obnoxious guy. All he did was talk about himself, and he talked about all this scientific mumbo jumbo. He had this thick accent and he talked really, really fast. And God, he ruined half my night. How did I get stuck with him? Another person talks to the same guy and walks away and goes home and said, I just had a brilliant conversation with Elon Musk. So in the perception of reality, there's a ton of room for interpretation. And going back to our first Mind Espresso, you want to choose the interpretation that is most useful to you. And the easiest hack here is to see progress in your interpretation that drives your perception, right? So instead of, did I have a good time or a bad time, what did I learn? How did I learn something that could help me make progress in my life? It's a mind hack that raises our perception, because ultimately what this equation is about is progress. If your perceived reality is higher than your expectation, you feel like you're going forward. And if it's lower, then you feel like you're going backward, and that makes you feel bad. Now, Sean mentions two other things. One is the intensity around any of these choices, right? So I may have incredible intensity about a football team, right? And the football team loses, and now I'm really in a bad mood. Is that intensity appropriate? Do we ask that question? Well, you need to ask that question, because a lot of times we have intensity around things that, were just some baggage from way back when. I'm really intense about X, Y, or Z. Doesn't matter anymore. And maybe it doesn't matter at all, which gets to his last point. He says the reason we have emotions around different things which aren't directly related to us is we actually put them on what he calls our mind map, right? We think that that thing relates to us, which is why it makes us so upset or gets us so excited. And he said you need to do some work and really figure out what's on your mind map, because the easiest way to change your demeanor on an ongoing basis is to get rid of the stuff that's not important, that you don't have control over, right? You may be attached to something happening overseas and you have no control, and it's influencing your life. It may be that you're attached to all these things because of Facebook, right? Decide what needs to be on your mind map. For the things that are on it, ask the question, what is the intensity level? How really important is that to me? And then manage on an ongoing basis, what is a realistic expectation that's useful to me? And what's the most useful reality, right? What's the perception that I will take with me around that? And that, in Sean's world, is the way to manage your emotions. And if you take the two together, what they're really talking about is agency, right? Not being a victim. Things don't happen to you and therefore you have an emotion. You have choice, right? In between stimulus and response is choice. That from Viktor Frankl. And that is this Mind Espresso.